Hello and welcome to Striper School's presentation of the unique life and attributes of Morone Saxillis. I'm Doug Kalish, and I'm the founder of Striper School. You know, striped bass are an important sport fish to anglers, and they also play an important role in the environment. Today, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the unique life and attributes of striped bass, and how the Department of Natural Resources manages striped bass populations. Striped bass are members of what the fisheries scientists call the temperate bass family. This small group has 5 members, most of which have horizontal bars across their body. These members include white bass, which are common in reservoirs and rivers. The average white bass weighs about 1 pound. Yellow bass are very similar in size and appearance as the white bass, but its coloration is more yellow than white. White perch are very common in coastal rivers. They're usually very small in size and seldom weigh more than 1/2 pound. Hybrid bass is a man-made species that is produced at DNR hatcheries. Hybrid bass are made by combining the eggs of a female white bass with the sperm of a male striped bass. Hybrid bass are very popular with anglers because they're relatively easy to catch, they're strong fighters, and can reach a large size, sometimes up to 20 pounds. And finally, the striped bass, the largest and last member of the temperate bass family. The key features of a striped bass are the 7 or 8 rows of black horizontal stripes that run the length of the body. These stripes are usually not broken, but that's not always the case. Beneath the black lines, the skin is generally white or silvery in color, but it may have shades of steel blue to light green near the upper body. If you opened the mouth of the striped bass, you would see another distinguishing feature. Located on the tongue are 2 small patches of sandpaper-like teeth. Striped bass are strong swimmers, and they're most often found roaming the open water with other stripers. Striped bass can average up to 7 miles of travel per day. Striped bass are naturally found along the Atlantic coast from Florida to Canada, and also the Gulf Coast from Florida to Texas. Because of their popularity among anglers as a sport fish, striped bass have been stocked into the Pacific coast states and into many freshwater lakes throughout the United States. When the water temperature reaches 60 degrees Fahrenheit, sometime in March or early April, the males swim as much as 180 miles upstream in just a few days to find the swift flowing waters located in shallow rocky shoals, like those pictured here. Males may arrive at the spawning grounds several weeks before the females, but when she arrives at the spawning grounds, she'll be surrounded by a small group of male stripers. At just the right time, she releases between 500,000 and 4 million eggs into the swift flowing water. The number of eggs depends upon the size and age of the female. As the eggs are released, the males release sperm into the water. The union of sperm and egg brings life to the newly fertilized egg. Over the next 48 to 72 hours, the developing egg must remain suspended in the water column to successfully develop and hatch out as a striped bass fry. If the eggs do not remain afloat in the current, they will settle to the bottom and die. In the wild populations of coastal rivers where natural reproduction does occur, the newly hatched fry are carried downstream by the river currents. And for a few days, fry are continually nourished by a tiny yolk sac, until they're able to swim around and catch food for themselves. Once the yolk sac is absorbed, the fry have become strong enough to freely swim around in search of microscopic organisms called zooplankton. The young grow very quickly on a diet of zooplankton, and within a few weeks they have grown from an unhatched egg into a small fish about 1 inch long. After their second birthday, male stripers will make their first migration to the spawning grounds in the spring with the other adult stripers. Female striped bass cannot produce ripe eggs until they're about 3 years old, so they have to wait another year before they're ready to join the males on their first spawning migration. Like most fish, females grow larger than males, and under ideal growing conditions, a 20 to 30-year-old female striped bass can weigh as much as 100 pounds. The Georgia state record was caught by Kelly Ward on May 30th, 1967. This huge female weighed 63 pounds. Several large stripers over 50 pounds are caught every year from Georgia's rivers and lakes, but none have yet topped the 63-pound mark. The giant 60-pound striper pictured here was caught from Lake Hartwell. The largest striped bass ever landed was caught by a commercial fisherman in 1891 from an estuary in North Carolina. That fish weighed 125 pounds. Striped bass prefer to live in large water bodies that maintain cool water temperatures less than 75 degrees Fahrenheit and high amounts of dissolved oxygen. Because of these requirements, striped bass habitat does not occur everywhere. The large rivers along coastal areas provide ideal habitat for striped bass, but large inland lakes also seem to provide a favorable habitat. During our nation's early history, striped bass were so abundant that they were a major food source for Native American Indians and European settlers. Native and early Americans would catch striped bass in crude nets and traps or hook and line, and then dry the fillets into strips like jerky. The colonists quickly realized the potential for overharvesting striped bass, so they passed a law in 1639 which prohibited the use of striped bass as garden fertilizer. By 1776, more laws were passed to protect striped bass by prohibiting their sale during the winter months when they are most vulnerable to capture. These colonial laws made striped bass the first natural resource in our nation to be regulated by the laws of government. Throughout the 1800s and early 1900s, commercial striped bass fishing became an important industry, especially in the waters of Virginia's Chesapeake Bay and throughout New England. Because of continuous commercial fishing pressure, increasing pollution problems, rapid development along the coast, and deterioration of natural spawning areas, striped bass populations throughout the Atlantic states declined dramatically. And by the 1970s, many striped bass fisheries were closed to fishing. Today, striped bass are highly regulated, and many fisheries management techniques are used to maintain their abundance. Today, stocking plays an important role in successful recovery of native striped bass populations, as well as maintaining inland populations in many lakes. Striped bass stocking is dependent upon the ability of fishery sections biologists to catch mature adults and produce young in the hatchery. Usually in early April, striped bass females move into the spawning grounds, carrying several thousand ripe eggs. Using specially designed electrofishing boats, biologists and technicians temporarily immobilize large stripers just long enough to capture them in large dip nets. These boats combine the power of a generator and transformer to create a field of electricity around the booms on the front of the boat. The boat is maneuvered to likely areas where fish may be. As fish enter the electric field disrupts their nervous system, which impairs the fish's ability to swim. These stunned fish are scooped up in dip nets and held in a holding tank on board the boat. These fish are not permanently affected by electrofishing, and they regain full body function shortly after leaving the electronic field. After mature adults are captured, they're transferred from the river to the hatchery in large circular tanks like the ones pictured here. When the adult stripers arrive at the hatchery, they are injected with a special hormone that makes the fish ready for spawning within 24 to 48 hours. After the eggs are fully developed, they are taken from the female by squeezing the abdomen, as pictured here on the left, to allow the ripe green eggs to flow into a large mixing bowl. When all the eggs are in the bowl, males are squeezed in a similar fashion to release sperm into the mixing bowl. The eggs and the sperm are gently stirred together by hand to allow fertilization to occur. Fertilized eggs are poured into the incubation jars pictured here. Water continuously flows over the fertilized eggs for about 48 hours until they hatch. The constant flow of water imitates natural river conditions, which help the eggs develop properly and hatch successfully. In about 2 days, newly hatched fry float out of the incubation jars into aquaria, where they are fed tiny brine shrimp several times a day for up to 7 days. After 7 days in an aquarium, about 300,000 fry per acre are stocked into fertilized rearing ponds at the hatchery. The striped bass fry grow quickly over the next month, gorging themselves on a diet of zooplankton. After about 1 month in the hatchery pond, the 1-inch long fingerlings, as they are now called, are ready to be stocked into large reservoirs. The rearing ponds are drained, and the fingerlings are netted out in the morning and then transported to the lakes that afternoon. Stocking typically occurs in mid-May as fisheries biologists travel to many water bodies to stock thousands, indeed millions, of striped bass fingerlings. By October, the young-of-year stripers have typically grown to a size of 10 inches like those pictured here. Water control structures like dams, locks, and gates alter the natural river flows, especially during the critical spring spawning months. Because of these alterations to the natural environment, survival of eggs and fry can be greatly reduced. The primary management goal for coastal striped bass populations is to restore these populations to their historic levels of abundance. The fisheries section also manages striped bass populations in several major lakes and reservoirs. But why? Striped bass are stocked into inland waters that has sufficient amounts of cool water, especially those during the summer, and have an overabundant shad population. So striped bass stocking is a management tool designed to control forage fish. And without their presence, shad populations would become too abundant, which would upset the balance between predators and prey. In addition, other predator species like largemouth bass and crappie are benefited by the positive effects that striped bass have on forage species, such as shad and herring. Striped bass not only benefit reservoirs by controlling shad populations, they also provide a benefit to anglers. Through the stocking efforts and population recovery measures, the popularity of striped bass fishing is growing rapidly. So you see, both the sport fish population and anglers benefit from striped bass management.